Now, Andy, just before I forget, I know you got to scoot. You pass in the bylaw. When you get a minute, just so, because we're going to deal with this, then we'll deal with bylaws after.
Mr. Valley's going to have very substantial proposed amendments.
Yep, yeah, I think I know what that's about. But no, I'll just get you to do the thing on, sorry. I have enough in their seats for a quorum. Welcome back. If we go to item 9, starting on page 63, we have one application this evening under our public meeting, public hearing portion of the council agenda. I will begin with that. I now officially open the public meetings held under the Planning Act and the Municipal Act. I advise all those in attendance that the Ontario Municipal Board has the power under the Planning Act to dismiss an appeal to either a zoning bylaw and or an official plan amendment. If the appellant does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or does not make written submission to Norfolk County Council before the zoning bylaw is passed and or the official plan amendment is adopted. I would like to advise everyone in attendance this evening that these meetings are televised and web streamed, and all items discussed here this evening are a matter of public record. The report this evening is Staff Report DCS 17-43. This application has been received to amend Norfolk County Official Plan to redesignate a portion of the subject lands from the commercial to urban residential and to amend the Norfolk County zoning bylaw to rezone the subject lands from general industrial zone, service commercial zone, urban residential type 1 zone, urban residential type 1 zone, and the development zone to urban residential type 1 zone and urban residential type 2 zone with a holding provision and a site-specific provision to permit reduced exterior side yard setbacks. The purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments are to develop a plan of subdivision made up of 115 residential dwelling units, combining single detached dwelling and semi-detached dwellings. ROI Group, Spedifora Inc., and agent G. Douglas Valley Limited has put forth this application affecting the lands described as Charles Street and Waterford. I will now officially open the public meeting upon DCS 17-43. Hi, Matt, how are you?
I'm well, thanks.
It's good to see you. Welcome, and I understand you are going to present your report to us.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir. You can proceed.
Thanks very much. The subject lands are located on the southwest or urban area of Waterford. The proposed development would be an extension of the west side of Charles Street. The site is approximately 9 acres in area, and the subject lands contain an unimproved road allowance known as McCool Street and 2 single detached dwellings that will be removed before the lands would be developed. The remainder of the lands are presently vacant. There is a residential land uses to the north and east, and there's also some commercial and industrial uses located to the north. There are mainly agricultural lands located to the south and vacant lands and a walking trail system located to the west. The applicant's proposing a new draft plan of subdivision that would include 77 single detached residential lots, 38 semi-detached residential lots, walkways, future residential block, that would be block C there, and a stormwater management facility. These are just a couple pictures of the site entering from the end of Charles Street and also from the eastern entrance off of Charles Street. The proposed draft plan of subdivision, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment applications will facilitate the development of a 115 dwelling unit subdivision within the southwest urban area of Waterford. The proposed development will complement the existing residential development within the area and provide local residents with housing options that include both singles and semis. The entire development will be subject to a holding provision until such time as wastewater services are available and the applicant has received approval of all of their conditions of the draft plan of subdivision. Planning staff are of the professional opinion that the application is consistent with the PPS, conforms to the goals and objectives of the Norfolk County official plan. The proposed development represents good planning and will add to the economic viability of the Waterford area and Norfolk County. Based on the foregoing policy review, planning staff recommend approval of this application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you very much, Matt. Questions to our planner, Matt, or Pam's here as well. Councillor Black, we'll start with you, then Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke, through you to Matt. I was just wondering, looking at the maps, and I'm not sure, on Charles Street, isn't there, the proposal is to have two ways to get in and out of the development, is that right? Like you have the one, there's...
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, the one at Charles is, it's not going to landlock any existing properties or houses? I wouldn't think it would, but...
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, it will not be landlocking any existing residential properties there.
Okay. And it definitely, I think before it only had the one entrance exit, now it has two?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, well, it does certainly look a lot better. I know on Woodway Trails, I've had a number of concerns, and I wondered if staff have them straightened out yet. One is placement of trees. So in this subdivision, is there something within the agreement that says one tree per lot and that it would be on the private property, not the county property?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in this particular case, this development is a bit unique. We did receive comments from our park staff in regards to the placement of trees. And in this instance, county staff have resolved to require a tree where it is, like where it can be fit onto private property. Where it can't be fit onto private property, then we would have it required to be on public property. So the hope is that we will find a spot somewhere on that lot or in front of it for a tree so that this entire subdivision has tree coverage.
Timing. Now that seems to have been the problem with maybe a couple of subdivisions in Simcoe that I'm aware of. I've had a few people calling me, well, when am I getting my tree? When am I getting my tree? And it seems to me that those agreements, once the subdivision was done, the developer was going to provide the trees. In the meantime, that could be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and still the people who had their homes built first are waiting all this time to get a tree. So, how is this subdivision going to work? Would they have to, the first home built would have to wait until the last one is built in order to get a tree? Or is there a schedule of tree placement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a good question, Councillor Black. And you can be assured that, yes, current and existing subdivisions do have different wording in their agreements than this subdivision does. And both planning and community services staff have been working hand in hand to change the wording and to have a better process in place. So we're quite confident moving forward that we have wording and a process in place that will allow us to be able to plant trees in a reasonable time frame at a reasonable point in the development.
Thank you. That's problem solved, I believe. Learning by maybe some of the mistakes. I don't know if it's a mistake, but some of the concerns that former residents and developments have experienced. The other one was up in Woodway Trails, the timing of the driveways, when they were going to be paved, the portion on county property. And there was a problem with the timing of that and the notification. As some people would go along with the developer who's doing the county piece on the boulevard and say, yes, I would like to have mine done at the same time, and then they pay that. But others, they might not want that, and then they end up with a seam, and it was more or less a timing issue, that if they were notified a little bit longer, they could have planned a little bit better and made a decision whether they wanted to go along with the developer's contractor or their own. So I know staff have had to deal with that. Has there been any new process put in place to, I guess, maybe notify people a little bit, give them maybe at least a week or so, or notice that they're coming in to do that pavement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a good point that you've raised. That section of the road allowance is owned by the county. I would defer that question to Public Works and Environmental Services as per the timing of when that would be done in terms of construction within that subdivision.
It's the timing of notifying the people that they are coming, so they have the opportunity to make a decision whether they want to go along with the contractor doing it or do their own. Lee, answer that maybe?
Lee?
Through the mayor to council, the works with regards to paving the driveway aprons is something that the developer is required to do through his agreement, and it's not something the county has control over in sense of timing or notification, because it's not work that the county undertakes.
Still, I get the calls, and can staff not communicate with the developer to ask them to give better notification, longer notification, a week perhaps?
Through the mayor to council, we can certainly make that request, but we do not have the ability to enforce that.
Well, it may continue to be a problem, and I was hoping that could be solved. The last concern that I've had up in some of the new subdivisions was drainage, and we have had problems in different developments with drainage, where some of the next phase has not been drained properly, and it's ended up in brand new houses' basements. And also drainage plans. I've had concerns from some of the new residents about the drainage plans being done, and I'm sure staff are well aware of this. I wondered if some of these drainage problems, as they have arisen, whether or not staff have considered them and put in a better process so these things wouldn't happen in the future. So I don't know if planning can answer that, or again, if Lee could answer that.
Through the mayor to council, that matter is something that is done through the detailed design, and staff are aware that there have been some. So as part of the detailed design, before us is just the draft plan of subdivision. It's not the detailed design, but we are requiring phasing drawings to be provided should the developer wish to phase it. And as such, we are looking at the drainage on an interim basis as well as on a permanent basis.
Okay.
It is something we're definitely considering. It's just not done as part of a draft plan approval of
Okay,
subdivision.
I understand that, but I think now's the time to address some of these problems. It sounds like staff are aware of it and will deal with it, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mayor Luke.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have three quick questions for staff. First of all, on page 4 of the report, second paragraph, it made reference to the fact that the applicant is providing a range of housing types, including single, semis, as well as townhouses, and yet in everywhere else in the report, I see it's only single detached and semi-detached, no townhouses. So that's the first question. Am I correct in assuming that's some kind of a typographic error and there's no townhouses as part of this development?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is a block, it's identified as Block C. It would be in the northwest part.
I see
That's
it
inverted.
down at the bottom of our drawing.
That's correct. It's our understanding that that block has been reserved for a medium-density future residential development, and that is why that townhouses have been referenced in the report.
Well, that's good. I will ask Mr. Valley then when the time comes. Thank you for that, Matt. My second one is also a simple one. Same page, further down where again it talks of planning comment, relative to accessing the trail, which is obviously one of our major trails. On our map, it's obviously at the bottom of the drawing. Do I see a little narrow, when I was looking at my maps, there is one, what appears to be a very narrow lot at the bottom of the drawing in that, I guess that block C, in other words. Is that where the access to the Waterford Heritage Trail would be?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you. And my last one, Mr. Mayor, talks about, is in regard to the stormwater management pond. So I'm looking at the bottom of page 5 of the report here, and I know we've had these issues relative to stormwater management ponds before in terms of vegetation. And I was glad to see reference under the second bullet from the bottom where it talks about a planting strategy will be required for the stormwater management pond to deal with things like thermal issues, encouraging wildlife. They do a better job of cleaning and filtering the stormwater if there's vegetation, etc. And yet neighbors end up not liking to have vegetation around or even in the stormwater pond. So how will that one be resolved to ensure that the stormwater management pond, if they commit themselves to a planting program, are we going to be able to ensure that that planting remains there in the long term and isn't being cleaned out every X number of years by somebody, creating a sterile environment again? I'm concerned that there's contradictory inputs on stormwater management plans and how, or ponds rather, and how will this one be ensured that it works the way we would like it?
Through the mayor to council, with respect to that, I'm going to say a lot has changed with respect to stormwater management ponds in the last 5 to 7 years. The environmental compliance approvals that are being given take into account the vegetation, et cetera, and they must be maintained with that vegetation in order for them to be compliant with their approvals. So as part of our annual inspections, et cetera, that we're required to do, that is stuff that has to be checked. To make sure that the vegetation is there and is thriving, or the ponds actually don't function as originally intended. So it's now been incorporated into the provincial environmental compliance approvals.
Thank you, Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 questions. When do we expect the wastewater treatment plant to be available to service this development?
Through the mayor to council, at this point, we're expecting it to be commissioned late in 2018.
2018, okay. And is there any parkland in lieu, parkland dedication, or is there cash in lieu for parkland for this development?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is no parkland included within this plan. However, there is a 5% in lieu.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sonnenberg, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm still having a problem with traffic flow with this plan. We now have 2 exits, but they both exit onto Charles Street. And Charles Street only exits one way, to the east. To me, that's only one exit. Planners, how do you feel about that? I mean, is that commonplace to have 115 units with one exit? Adding to that the fact that there's now Charles Street goes to Washington, that's the way out of town to Thompson Road. Add all the houses that are on Washington. I see this as overcrowding of traffic onto two little streets, and I'm just not comfortable with it. Your comments is, have you ever seen this many units with one exit? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did look at a number of different configurations for this subdivision. We looked at an access from Thompson Road. However, if you look at the south end of this subdivision, which is shown on sort of the right-hand side of that drawing before you, The elevation there, the topography of the land is a bit extreme to try to add an entrance off of that, and also the sight lines from having an entrance there would make it very difficult. There were not a lot of options for access into this subdivision, and they did prepare a traffic impact study, and as a result, and Lee, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, she's putting up her hand. Maybe I'll let Lee answer the rest of that question.
Lee?
Through the mayor to council, I just wanted to point out, Matt may wish to add to this at the end, that Washington is in fact a collector road. It is not a local road. So it is actually designed for exactly this purpose, to collect the traffic and take it out to Thompson Road, which is an arterial road. So I just wanted to be clear that it wasn't in fact two local roads. It's a local road coming out to a collector, which is in keeping with good transportation and good planning exercises, is to have your local roads empty out to a collector, and it's in very close proximity to the arterial road.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Solomon. Councillor Brunton?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. My question through you to staff is, I understand it used to be a tree on the front property on the municipal property, the 15 or 18-foot boulevard. I found more and more now that people don't want a tree. They want to do their own landscaping. So is there a clause in there that allows them to not get a tree if they don't want it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the provision for tree planting has been addressed in condition 15 of the draft approval conditions. I'll just read that out loud for everyone. And further, that the owner shall prepare and implement a street tree planting plan, which includes at a minimum 1 tree per lot and must be prepared by a certified arborist to the satisfaction of Norfolk County. Trees must be prescribed to public lands where suitable locations exist. Where this requirement cannot be met by planting solely onto public lands, trees may be prescribed on the front of lots where suitable locations exist and must be included in this street tree planting plan.
So
It's not a lot of option to opt out of having a tree within either your front yard that you own or on county-owned properties.
you're saying you must have one?
That's correct, the way this
Well,
has been
I
worded.
think, and I can speak from experience just recently, where people had requested a tree. As soon as they found out it was going to be on the road allowance, they didn't want it. Or when they found out it was going to be on their property, they didn't want it. So they had done their own landscaping. So would you not allow a property owner, lots are a lot smaller than they used to be too, like, would you not, I don't know whether the county likes the trees still planted on the road allowance, like 15 or 18-foot boulevard. Like, I find it odd that if people, they landscape today, if they don't want a tree, that why would they have to take one?
And through you, Mr. Mayor, you're correct. Lots have become a lot smaller. It's become a lot more challenging to find a spot for tree. We do have requirements to have certain amount of canopy within new subdivisions. It's a bit tricky to find a spot for that tree, and hopefully the wording that we've put into this condition does allow some wiggle room there between either planting on private or public property.
So you're not going to allow an owner to not have a tree then? Like,
Yeah, through, perhaps Bill might be able to answer this better than me, but my understanding is that this street tree planting plan would identify the locations, the best suited location for those trees, and then park staff would work from that, but Bill, you can jump in.
Through the mayor to Councillor Brunton. Yeah, and we work very closely with Public Works because they know what's in the ground sort of thing. I think our goal is to have a tree per lot for canopy cover and aesthetics in the neighborhood. There could be the off-handed one that there might not be, but our goal is to try to have them, but we will work with the people.
so that may include not putting a tree.
It may in extreme cases, but it would have to be because Public Works, we can't get in there right away because of utilities and small frontage, that sort of thing.
Well, I guess If you can't put it on county property, and the owner owns the lot, and he doesn't want it, you can't really put it on his property either, right? Make sense?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, the way this is worded through these conditions is that it would become part of that tree planting plan. It gets put into their condition of approval it becomes part of their agreement, and it's something that the county could enforce. So yes, it would be required to remain on their property.
Well, I can see that being a problem. I think private property owners like to landscape, and if you come in and tell them you're going to put a tree on their property and they don't want it, I suspect it wouldn't last too long. Anyways, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Councillor Black.
Here, look, I just noticed there's a sheet on our desks, and I'm not sure, I guess it's from the developer?
I would believe that's a sheet from Mr. Valley, and he'll be speaking to that very shortly.
I just wondered if staff had anything to say about it, or...
I think we'll wait for Mr.
Okay.
Valley, and I'm sure they may have something to say about it.
That's fine.
If that's okay. Yeah. We'll wait to hear from Mr. Valley. Thank you. Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for letting me ask a second question. Mine similarly is on trees, but it's the agreed upon row of cedar trees that will ultimately serve as a buffer between the development and the industrial designated area. I think it's a great idea, by the way. My only question relates to the maintenance of that row of cedar trees. Are there provisions built into the subdivision agreement that obligate either the developer or the county or someone to maintain those trees for a period that allows them to get established, i.e. waters them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a condition of approval that will be eventually transferred into the future subdivision agreement. So there will be provision in the future to maintain those trees where they're located.
Any other questions? Councillor Black?
On sidewalks, the subdivision, every road in the subdivision has a sidewalk, at least one on one side of the road?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none at this time, I'll move on. I note that Agent Mr. Valley is here. So now I will ask that if anyone is in favor of speaking, is speaking in favor, rather, of the application to come forward, and as always, we extend that to the applicant or agent first. Mr. Valley, if you wish to speak at this time, it would be a good time to come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Luke and members of council. I am here today with my clients, Kent and Mark Dixon, and we obviously would like to chat with you about the applications that are in front of us today. Mr. Baird has my PowerPoint up there for me, if I can. That'd be great. You're going to have to click a whole bunch, Matt, but we'll work together. So here we are today. This development is referred to as the Cedar Park Extension because the subdivision immediately to the north of it is Cedar Park, and we're here today for those three applications that are outlined. So our presentation outlined today, introductions, I think everyone in the room knows me, and again, my clients are here. We have three applications before you today. You want me to try this? We have an OPA, official plan amendment, a zoning bylaw amendment, and a draft plan approval. There is a previous draft plan approval on this land, on a portion of this land, that was issued 5 years ago. That has been stalled because of the sewage situation in Waterford. That application is, the approval is about ready to expire in a couple of weeks, I believe. But we're going to talk briefly about that. There's a history of land assembly in the area, so we'll review that with you. The submission documents that we made, we're really happy that the review comments have come in with 100% support for what we want to do. I do want to talk with you about the conditions of draft plan approval, and that legal piece of paper that is on your desk is from us, and we have had some discussion with staff about this and circulated that to them later this afternoon. And then obviously lots of time for questions and answers. So here is the subdivision. This has already been put forth in the planner's application or presentation. This colored map gives you a little bit better idea of what the development is all about. Whoops, wrong button, sorry. This is Thompson Road out here at the edge. The blue area is the stormwater block that will be dedicated to the municipality, and there'll be a pond right in that area. This darker brown color is the location for the single-family lots. The lighter brown is where the semi-detached lots will be. And this block right here answers Councillor Oliver's question. That is a block dedicated for townhouses. The applicant also owns this piece of land here, and it's our hope that through your official plan amendments that are coming forward to you, that this piece of land over here will become designated into a residential form, and that these two blocks can then be joined and accommodate a townhouse block. So those are the townhouses that we're referring to. So the planning applications, again, I'll go through this quickly because Matt's already touched on it. We're amending the official plan for a small portion of the land to change it from commercial to urban residential. That's just a very small block down by Thompson Road. There's a zoning bylaw amendment. This property is zoned a whole bunch of different things. At the end of the day, it's going to be urban residential, R1A and R2. And then our application for draft plan of subdivision. So we have 77 singles, 38 semis, that townhouse block we were talking about, and obviously the stormwater pond, the big blue area that I showed you on the plan. So that's what we're asking for approval for tonight. The previous draft plan approval, you may remember, Merrill Van Roy was the applicant. The application was approved in 2012, so it expires this month. That's a 5-year window. There were 18 single-family dwellings that were approved at that time. After the approval was granted, when the approval was granted, it came, of course, with sewage capacity. There was a lot of discussion about sewage capacity at the time, and subsequently, because of sewage, that development was frozen by Norfolk County, and that's where that still sits today. Mr. Dixon then purchased the Van Roy lands, and when he purchased it, there was sewage allocation available. The project was ready to go. And then all of a sudden there was a problem and the land was frozen. So he's been in this quandary since he purchased the land where he thought he was buying development ready land and now he's not, but hopefully soon those sewage issues will be behind us and we can move on. Mr. Dixon then did subsequently purchase additional lands from Mr. Feltmate and some other people to the north, so that he's been able to bring a much larger package to you, which is a much more comprehensive subdivision application representing a larger chunk of that area of Waterford. So this is the draft plan approval that was previously approved. This is Charles Street again here, and this is Thompson Road. These brown lots here are the 18 units and here that were draft plan approved 5 years ago and have been sitting waiting for your sewage plant to get expanded. The red area was something that the county staff at the time wanted to be included because water main looping and all those things which are kind of irrelevant today. But that's the draft plan approval that sits on the books and will quietly expire in the next couple of weeks, assuming that we get an approval this evening. So agency review comments. These are really tiny, you can't read them, but there's all these different agencies have all commented on the plan, and all of them say no comment or no objection or no concern, or we'll look at some stuff when you submit final design and so on. But we're very happy that all of the agencies that have commented have either had no comment or no objection. So that's almost unusual for this type of a development of this size. Policy review, your planners have looked at policy statements, the official plan, the PPS. They all agree that we're very consistent with those policies. They think our application is good planning. They talk about the economic viability of Norfolk County and Waterford. They recommend it for approval. And there are, again, no objections noted from any staff or agency. We were here before to talk about McCool Street, and we heard County Council talk about this idea of single access, and it's come up again tonight. So this has already been addressed, but I just want to give staff or council some comfort here. The original proposal that we had did in fact have a road that went out to Thompson Road. You'll all know that there's a bridge there which supports the trail, and it has abutments, and there were we did a traffic report, and that was peer-reviewed by the municipality, and there were issues with sight lines because of those bridge abutments, and that the sight line distances were insufficient, and it was recommended that there not be a connection off of Thompson Road. So in that was the result of the traffic study. As a result of that, that access out to Thompson Road was deleted from the plan, and we went through a process of reviewing numerous different alternative road patterns with planning and with Public Works, and the one that you see before you tonight is the consensus and the agreement that we came to with staff on the best possible road pattern. A traffic study was then modified to reflect the new pattern with the single Charles Street access, and that traffic study again was looked at by Norfolk County Public Works Department. They did not have concerns with that. You've heard Lee Robinson speak about that tonight. It as well went to a third-party reviewer. Again, there were no concerns. Norfolk Fire and EMS have all looked at the plan. Again, they have no concerns. And we as an engineering firm also don't have concerns with that plan, given the extensive review and consultation that's gone on with that. Since that plan has been established, you should also know that there's been extensive engineering work done on that, based on that road layout. Plan and profile drawings, sewer drawings, grading drawings, all these things have been required as far as submission for site plan approval. So there's been a heavy investment by the developer on that road pattern, given the buy-in that we've received from your staff and from the third-party reviewers. So the submission documents, what do we actually submit? Well, we submitted back in April of 2016, so we're a little over a year ago that we submitted. There was a big package that went in, planning justifications, all those things you see up there. Again, 12 pages of engineering drawings and designs were submitted, water main modeling, stormwater management reports, the whole 9 yards. Everything was submitted, and it's all been part of a third-party review by Ainley on behalf of Norfolk County, and we have those comments and are working on addressing those now as part of the final design. So what's recommended for approval? All the agencies support the application. We're 14 months old. The developer simply needs to get moving on. He needs to get draft plan approval so that he can move this to the next step. But there are concerns regarding some of the conditions to draft plan approval. I have to say that we're happy that when we started out with the list of draft plan conditions from staff, there were 60 some odd conditions attached to this development. We're used to seeing in the neighborhood of 30. And we had a good meeting with staff, and as a result of that, staff cut and slashed, and I think now we're down to 48, which I think is about 20 less than we had originally. So we were quite happy with that. Obviously, we'd like fewer than 48, but nonetheless, here we are. So what I'd like to do is talk to you about some specific draft plan conditions, and I've outlined those on that legal piece of paper that I've passed to you, and we'll go through these 8 items that we would like changed. The first one is condition 3, and it simply says that the plan will expire in December of 2020. We simply don't think that 3.5 years is long enough for this developer to submit his final designs, to go through the design review approval process, which will take at least a year, and then to go through the construction of services for phase 1, build houses in phase 2, and then go all through that process again for phase 1, and then go through it again for a second phase. We're going to be back here asking for an extension. There's no way we can achieve 2 phases and 115 homes in 3.5 years. So what we would like to see is to extend that out. The Planning Act requires a minimum of 3 years for these approvals, so we're basically at the minimum now. We can go much longer. The existing draft plan approval that's on the site was given for 5 years. He's been held up because of sewage capacity for 5 years, has gone nowhere over that time. We would ask for 5 years, which would make it consistent with some other developments, consistent with the first approval that's given. So we think 5 years is appropriate. We'd like that December 2020 changed to December 2022. So that's the first item we've got outlined, condition 3. Condition 23 is probably the most important one that we want to talk with you about tonight. If there's nothing else that council takes away from this discussion, it's this discussion on item 23. So condition 23 says and further that the owner understands and accepts that Norfolk County is under no obligation to provide final plan registration for this development until sewage capacity is available and allocated to this development. Now that's a pretty standard worded condition. And depending on how you interpret it, it may be just fine for this development as well. But what we have to understand here is originally there was a draft plan approval here. And I stood in front of this council and we talked a lot about sewage allocation, and the developer was assured that there were 18 units available and he could go ahead immediately. Then Mr. Dixon bought the property on that understanding, that those 18 units could go ahead immediately. After Mr. Dixon bought the property, things changed. That happens. We understand that. We're not complaining. Things changed. And Mr. Dixon was then told that as soon as Norfolk County signed a construction contract to upgrade the sewage plant, he would be able to go ahead with his development. And the theory being that by the time he got his houses built and everything done, that the plant would be done before he flushed a toilet. Then things changed again, and again, we're not complaining, but things changed. And now the understanding is that the development is to be timed and staged in coordination with the sewage plant upgrade so that the first toilet does not get flushed until your sewage plant is upgraded and what's called commissioned. So at the very end of the construction process, there's testing and so on to prove that the plant can actually achieve what it's supposed to achieve. That's what commissioning is. So the agreement that we've talked about with your staff for several months is that the development should be timed so that the first toilet flushes, call it on the same day that the sewage plant is commissioned. In order for that to happen, a whole bunch of things need to happen while the sewage plant is under construction. We need to get the holding lifted from the zoning. Why? Because to register our plan of subdivision, we have to have appropriate zoning. So we need to register a plan of subdivision. Why? Because we can't put sewers and water mains and all those things in the ground until the plan is registered. We need to put the sewers and the water mains in the ground because we can't get building permits until that occurs. We need building permits so that we can build houses, so that we can have a toilet in a house ready to flush on the first day that your plant is commissioned. Now, where the concern comes is what this says here, this condition 23, what it says is the county is under no obligation to let us register our plan until sewage capacity is available. Well, to Lee Robinson, what that means, capacity is available, and we've talked about this, what she says, what that means to her is once the plant's underway and it's going and she's confident that this is going to happen, then it's available. I'm a little more skeptical because I'm concerned that Lee's going to get a great job offer from the city of York and leave Norfolk County, and someone else is going to come in here and they're going to read this and say, Mr. Valley, it says right here, until sewage capacity is available. That means that your plant is done. It's working. It's available. The difference being that if we go by that interpretation, I can't get my holding released, I can't get my subdivision agreement registered, I can't service, I can't build houses, I can't do any of that until the sewage plant is 100% up and running, which probably is a 2-year delay for the developer, who has been patiently waiting for years because he bought a piece of land that originally had sewage capacity and allocation. It was ready to go, and he's been waiting. So it's very important to us that this understanding of the toilet flushes on the same day that the plant is commissioned, that we get that in writing, so it's very clear. So what we've done is on this piece of legal paper that you have, there's a great big long paragraph, which I'm sorry about the length of it. I've already talked about all these points, so I'll just sort of skim through here. That's what this long wording is that no one can read in the audience, and I apologize for that, but council, you've got this on your desk. So what this says is that Norfolk agrees to permit the registration of the final plan of subdivision in whole or in part, so if we want to do a phase, we can do a phase, that they agree to register an executed subdivision agreement, They agree to permit the construction of the subdivision services. They agree to lifting the holding provision from the zoning, the issuance of building permits, all prior to the commissioning of the upgraded Waterford treatment facility. Now, we can't just do that without some kind of control, because what happens if our houses are built and your plant's not ready? We can't have people living in there flushing the toilets when the plant's not done. So, we say Norfolk County agrees to this, provided the owner agrees that the subdivision agreement will contain a clause stating that final connection of the subdivision's sanitary sewer mains to the sewer system and final connection of the water mains will not be permitted. An occupancy permit will not be issued until the Waterford wastewater facility has been commissioned. So we can do everything we want. We can sign our agreements, put our services in the ground, get building permits, build the houses, but we can't make that final downstream connection of our sanitary sewer from our system to yours and our water main system from our system to yours until Lee tells me the plant's been commissioned. And then the next day we can make those connections and we're off to the races. That's what's being proposed here as a condition 23 in lieu of what was written by staff. What is written by staff works great as long as Lee's here, because she and I are on the same page. We agree on this, but who knows how that's going to evolve over the next couple of years and who's going to be interpreting what, who appeals what to where, who knows. It's very important. This is very, very, very important to the developer that we get this understanding in writing in those conditions of draft plan approval. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is condition 28, and it talks about all construction access coming in from Thompson Road. We're a little concerned about this. Recall that there was a traffic study that talked about a street going out in that same location, and there was poor sight lines, and we weren't to put a street there. So construction dump trucks and all these things coming in and out of there maybe isn't a great idea. But what's a real concern to us is if we phase the subdivision, and that is the intention, is to do this in 2 phases, that would mean that trucks of gravel and asphalt and pipe and all those materials that have to be delivered to the site would have to come in off of Thompson Road. They would have to drive through the stormwater management pond, which Councillor Oliver has told us, and he's absolutely correct, is going to be beautifully landscaped. We're going to have to drive through all that landscaping to bring all this stuff into the subdivision to get to phase 2. And we just don't think that's a great idea from our perspective. So we ask that that condition be deleted. Here's a little graphic again, just to show you what we're talking about. So up on the screen, this is Thompson Road. This is what the condition says. All construction has to come through here. So to get up, phase 1, by the way, is phase 1 will be this street, that little cul-de-sac, around, up, and back. Okay? So phase 2 would be this U shape. If we're going to be servicing over here, the only way to get there then would be through this stormwater pond, which is all landscaped and done and finished and hopefully accepted by the municipality. We don't like that idea, and we would ask that that be deleted. There may be some discussion about concern about Charles Street, and it's a low-volume road and a low pavement, but there also are requirements in here for Charles Street to be completely reconstructed. So perhaps there's a better solution there. We just ask that you delete that. The next one is, in fact, the reconstruction of Charles Street. We've been going at this draft plan for over 5 years now, and there's been a lot of discussion about the need to upgrade Charles Street and who should pay for what, and various approvals and various comments at various times have had various different solutions. What's suggested in the draft plan conditions is that there be a negotiation for cost sharing. So if you flip to section number 29, it says that the owner shall agree to upgrade Charles Street to urban standards from Washington Street to the west end of Charles Street. Previously, what we had talked about is that the developer would upgrade the part across his frontage. Now we're talking about all the way out to Washington Street. Then there's another one in here in section 29. The county will negotiate with the owner a cost sharing for water or wastewater infrastructure costs in excess of what would be needed to service the development. So we're talking here again about an older road that's not in great condition, that needs upgrading. Who should pay for it? Is it completely the developer's responsibility because he's putting a subdivision in? Should the municipality take some ownership that this is a road that needs to be upgraded anyway? And should they be looking to the developer simply to carry all the freight? What our request would be is that we simply, instead of having some negotiation in the future where the developer has no idea of the magnitude of cost he's committing to, that we simply agree now to split those costs 50-50 between the developer and the municipality. So that is a request we would make for condition 29. Condition 31 talks about sidewalks, and it talks about including sidewalks and outside the subdivision. So these are not just on the subdivision streets. We're now talking about beyond the limits of the subdivision, the developer being required to construct those sidewalks until you can get to another sidewalk. That seems to me to be a little above and beyond what's normally required, but nonetheless, that's what's here. I read something in the paper the other day about council making a decision regarding sidewalks and that they were going to be optional or something. I didn't really follow that, and it was in the newspaper, so I'm not taking it as gospel, but I don't know what's going on there. Again, we ask that this condition be deleted and that we not be required to build sidewalks outside of our development. Condition 35 talks about the removal of the holding provision on the zoning. This is the same issue that we faced back in condition 23, because it says in condition 29, if you read it, and I'm just going to flip there for you. I'm sorry, I've got the wrong condition. Condition 35, the owner agrees that where the holding symbol appears on the zoning schedule, that Norfolk County shall only consider removal of the H upon satisfaction of adequate services and facilities, or can be made available to subject service lands, and that the following have been completed or addressed. So the following have been completed or addressed. Item 1, the Waterford wastewater treatment facility. So if I'm reading that to clear that condition, I cannot get the holding removed until the Waterford wastewater treatment facility is completed. Well, I can't wait until it's completed, and we've agreed it won't wait until it's completed. That holding's got to come off while it's under construction, because, as we talked, the holding's got to come off so the subdivision can be registered, so the services can be installed, so the houses can be built, so the toilet can be flushed when Lee's got her plant commissioned. So that timing does not work with what we've been